So we have Dr. Gagandeep Singh here. He'll be kind of discussing an approach to writing a review article. Dr. Gagandeep Singh is an accomplished physician from Punjab, India, currently doing his neuroradiology fellowship at Columbia University in New York. He finished his residency at Rutgers Newark Beth Israel Medical Center in New Jersey and served as a chief resident during his final year. Dr. Singh has gathered rich research experience in India and United States and has multiple reviewed publications in his name. His primary research interest lies in the field in finding surrogate imaging markers for brain tumors using radiomics AI-based models. In his previous role as a Case Coulter Translational Research Fellow, he worked closely with the PI and Tech Transfer Office, assessing the potential and progress of translational research projects at Case Western Reserve University in Cleveland, Ohio. He also pursued his MBA at Case Weatherhead School of Management and participated in many national and international business competitions. He enjoys driving, tennis, golf, and video games. Welcome, Dr. Gagan. On to you.
I should write. I enjoy research other than video games, so probably that will gain more interest. But thank you for for this amazing introduction. And today we will talk about we'll focus on the review articles, but all in between go and build credentials to just give my experience as I moved through my literature review research part. So hopefully that experience will be helpful to anyone who's trying to enter into that space. So let me share the screen. I have a few slides to share. So I'm just gonna share. Let me know when you can see my screen.
We can see.
Okay, so okay, so you can see my first screen types of review article.
Yes.
Okay, perfect. So yeah, so today we're gonna basically talk about how to write your a first review article. I always feel like the first article that's probably is the hardest one. Once you have done it once, it becomes much easier. You have credibility. You have collaborators, mentors, all those important pieces in place. So it's always the first one. The initial resistance is the hardest to break. Once you have done that, it's become much easier to continue on that journey. So that's where the focus is going to be. And before we talk about what are the things that you need to write your first review article, I just want to touch base briefly. That what are the different types of literature reviews? And I have spoken to many students who are working in the space. Simply, even when I was at that stage, I didn't really at that point know what's the difference between all those things. And I was kind of full confused because I felt like they all are probably the same. So the simple thing of in any review article, the one that you can do very easily is a narrative review. What is narrative review? So for example, pick the latest trend in your field. Like I'm from radiology, and last couple of years, we have been talking about this AI, deep learning, radiomics, all those cool things that probably will transform how the radiology will be practiced. So those are hot trends. And there are many papers that came out, the trends basically started from 2013, 14, and there are tons of papers that came into radiology literature after 2015, and trend has been consistently going up. So if you are the one looking into that space, you're like, hey, I just want to look into different, experts who have written these papers, and I want to pick a couple of the good papers and make my narrative how the field has progressed, and from my experience or the experts in your in your paper, what they feel like how this field is going to move ahead. So that's basically a narration of the literature out there. You're going to pick a couple of papers which are highly cited or that you think has been the landmark papers. You're going to summarize those papers into a narration, which if I as a person want to pick one paper, then that should be your paper, which would summarize all the previous paper into one shop stop. So that's probably the easiest thing that you can do if you have the good trend in there in place, and then you pick that and make your narration with the field. It's all good, but the problem with that is that you don't have any systematic way of like doing that. For example, I want the narration that AI is good. Like I pick the narration. I'm going to start looking to literature. I'm going to find a paper which are saying AI is good. This is going to be very helpful, and my conclusion, I will include a paper that align with my conclusion. So you see there are biases, and there's no way to reproduce. If you want to reproduce the same research I did, there's no way you can reproduce you because you won't know if I picked Tejasvi's paper or Dr. Mansuri's paper and left, like a Dr. Manjula's paper, like because that didn't align with my narration. So that's the, like a thing that you need to understand when you're writing, or more importantly, when you're reading those papers. So then comes to like, what are the other papers, type of reviews that could be very helpful and that could be reproducible, and then you can basically can rely more on those papers. So then this concept of these other tools like systematic literature review and meta-analysis, they generally go hand in hand. Meta-analysis is a subset of systematic review. So systematic review is like you have a group of papers, now you segregate it, and you have a proper methodology which you have to submit as part of your submission. So if I have to reproduce your how you pick those papers, you want to describe into your methodology, and I can replicate. So in that way, you are including all papers that are in your favor or not in your favor, and then you're making conclusion based on that. So it's the epitome of evidence-based medicine, that's what we call. And meta-analysis is a subset, basically. And in meta-analysis, you the data that all those studies that they had, and then you combine everything together. One advantage is, especially for example in AI brain tumors, that's where my research is. If you see the sample size is very small, and you barely have like 50, 100 cases of GBM studies, for example, and papers coming out of there. You want to make a solely conclusion. You need high power. For high power, you need high precision. You need more numbers. What you can do with in the meta-analysis, you can pull the data from all these different systematic review paper that you have collected, and then use that data to make a conclusion which could be in your favor of your hypothesis or against. So as long as you understand that component, you will be able to, the first thing will be, design a hypothesis, and then start looking, slicing and dicing how you're going to achieve that. So I hope this helps clear, some of the misconception or, the fogginess that we have when we are looking into these areas. So there are 5 steps, I mean, of course, we're going to talk about Prisma, where they have 27 steps, but I want to keep it short. The 5 steps, if you have to put things together, what are those things that you want to basically look at and formulate your, like a timeline according to that. And those are the crucial steps, So like I said, once you have hypothesis, it could be just very vague, it doesn't need to be like very clear in the beginning, as long as you know which area you're looking at, what question you're trying to get answered, you can start with the process. Then once you have your initial thought in place, you can start looking into literature. I always start with a simple PubMed, so that's one place you want to go. You will get all the authenticate research over there. You can start looking into over there with the few, keywords, and start seeing what's out there, in your field. Start with the latest and then go backward, up to a decade or whatever you feel like. In AI, you can't go back further than 2015 because those articles probably won't even hold any, they're obsolete now. So depending on what you're trying to answer, start looking into the literature. And once you read initial 5, 6 papers which you think are the most relevant related to the problem that you're trying to address or the conclusion that you want to make, now is the time to refine your, state your problem clearly. Like initially you had like foggy. Now, once you have collected the data, now you have to clear out that what you really want out of this, because spend most of the time over there. I mean, people think like, okay, let me just quickly do that in 5 minutes and then I'll spend the rest of the time on the others. I think that's the most important part. Once you have that clear, everything falls into place. And we'll talk about the Prisma, which is basically a guideline for any systematic review or meta-analysis. So those are the things that you want to include, into your paper. of like those things are basically these summaries. Like these paper are very structured. You need to have a title, of course, and you should be catchy one, I guess, like because you're selling your research, like it should be catchy one so people read. And abstract, I would say abstract, like it should be very concise. Different journals have different, like 250 words, 350 words, but it doesn't matter how many words the comment is. It's like a trailer of your movie. If you can't sell your trailer, no one is gonna come and watch your movie. If they don't get the idea, when I read paper, if it's not even clear what I'm gonna get from like a 3,000 words, if I don't get the whole gist of that from 250 words, I probably will skip it, or I'll just go to the diagrams. So make your abstract concise, clear. It should tell. It could be structured, unstructured. I mean, it could be a paragraph wise, or certain general ones. Like your aim, objective. Your result, conclusion in the abstract. So depending on how they want, the message should be clear cut and like convincing. Once you have that, then introduction is basically about like what people have done. Like so you're trying to address like a certain problem, evidence based. Like for example, you want to see what's the role of like imaging as a marker in brain tumors. Like you want to first describe what the brain tumor is. For example, if I want to like glioblastoma, describe what glioblastoma is, why this research is important, why people would even care about reading this. Like so you need to make that kind of flow from the beginning itself. And then of course your main like what you did, what are you different things you are describing, that's your mind body of the whole paper. And then like, and then in the conclusion, people are always confused that conclusion should be, now you have done all this hard work, and then what you really got out of that should be very precise. And if you can tell, you should be like a future directions. Like, because review is, you reviewed the past, now you want to, you summarize the like a literature and make your point. Now you want to tell what should be done in this field, or if you want to do, what should be the future direction. That's very important. That's how I believe the paper should be. And then other things, of course, like bibliography. We'll talk about all these components briefly in the subsequent slides. But the point is, like these all are important components. And of course, depending on which methodology you went through, if you're following Prisma guidelines, they have very clear-cut way of how and which data bases you should be looking into, like how should you have your inclusion exclusion criteria. So all those things need to be tailored out in the beginning. And then cite equally, all those biases, those are important, just from the point that you shouldn't be, again, you shouldn't be including papers of your friends, which you should do as well, but include paper from other people as well. Like so there shouldn't be biases, but like it should be properly cited. Like these, that's why they came up with these guidelines, because people earlier had, we as a human being as inherent biases. So all these structured platforms basically came up with, so we can reduce the biases. We can have a framework that can be replicated, and if you follow that, it becomes easier. So basically what we call is a pyramid of research. Like of course the basic research is in the lab, in vitro research, like again, not my like a area of interest, but the important one, like where the research starts, like lab or bedside research. And then animal research, you have then ideas, editorials, will touch base few of them. And then you have clinical research, case reports, case series report could be 1-2 patient series, multiple patients. And then you have like a case control study, cohort study, randomized control studies. And then on top of everything, if you think about, like, you're giving the final conclusion. People have done, probably started like this research 50 years ago, then this 20 years ago, and then you have this recent one 5-10 years ago. Whatever the time frame is, what you are telling in the end is like, hey, I'm going to give you the one summary of all the work that has been done in this space, in this specific question, and this is the conclusion. You're giving a conclusion of 10 people that they did research in Harvard, Columbia, you name it, and then you're telling that this is the conclusion. So your paper carries a lot of weight. That's why if you see, if it's done properly, your paper could be one of the highest cited paper, because now if anyone has to look for that particular question, they're going to go for your paper, and from your paper they're going to find all of the papers. So you become one-stop shop. So it's also very kind of lucrative in the sense of, your academic career. It helps you with building credibility and, citation. People recognize your name, because they are reading your paper, they're citing you. So it's very important. You need to understand you're putting the last block of the pyramid, so it has to be perfect. So these are, not to scare anyone. These are just basically, I just took it from the Prisma, like a checklist. So Prisma stands for Preferred Reporting Items for Systematic Reviews and Meta-Analysis. This was a consortium that was created to make sure that when you're putting the last block on the top of the pyramid, is perfect, seamless, and is replicable. Like if someone has to make sure that what you're saying is correct, then they should be able to replicate and make sure there were no biases or errors. So I won't spend much time here. We already discussed about this, but just show you guys to know, once you start, you can go here. They have very detailed, this is just a snapshot, very detailed of each part of the checklist item that you should have for your systematic review or meta-analysis. So starting with a title, abstract, introduction, what's your rationale, what's your objectives. So it's very detailed, over there. And methods, you can have different methodology, like of conducting your research. There's no one fit, but at least you should have that in there and describe how you did and why you did. And this is another, like I said, they have 27 line items over there. Then they talk about the results, how you talk about the results, and discussion. Discussion is an important part. Like in my slide, that was part of the corpus. The discussion is basically, now you collected, and I'll, if we get time, I'll show one of the paper, like we're how, we approach, and in the discussion, how you bring everything together. And then, in conclusion, you make your final, like a conclusion based on all the discussion that you formulate over there. So so this is very important piece. I just put it there so you guys know what Prisma is or Prisma guidelines are, and you can Google it, go to the website. That is the standard. You probably have to do that for first one or two papers, then it becomes your, kind of a habit. So you don't have to go just over there because you know these things that you need. And this is just a kind of, you will see many of the papers, these flowcharts are there. They're basically to describe, like how you should structure, like if you have done this, like literature review, put it over there, how many databases you look into, at least 3 databases you need to look in. Medline, of course, PubMed is the most important one. You can't miss that. And then there are other, the Embase, I guess, Scopus and Cochrane Central. There are multiple databases. You can pick at least any 2, 3. People say at least 3, more is better. But most of the time, like at least you start with the PubMed, you will get most of the information. So you say how many databases you looked into, like what was your inclusion exclusion criteria, how many, like cases you looked at, how many patients that they had, you kind of, a flow chart that they will require. So I think I always find it kind of easy to explain things from the things that I have done. So I'll open one of the paper, and I have 3 here to show an example, different ways, like narrative research versus systematic review versus one of the paper that we sent for review. But, the journal loved it so much, they, asked us to write editorial for that issue. So, and I'll just quickly go over here on this one. And just to show you guys, like how, like you should be looking into, like when you're structuring. So this is, one of the paper that we published last year that was basically genomics. That's my interest, like update in gliomas. This was one of the Nature, like journals. And you start with, again, the things we talked about. So these are the basically the sections. Now you start with the abstract, like what you really want to do or what's in your paper. It should be very well with precision described in the abstract part, because that's where your trailer of the movie is. And then once you do that, then for us, it's the brain tumors. So I want to talk about what's the background, why it's even important, like what has been done so far in the literature out there, and what are we going to achieve, so you go with this and then say, in this review, we describe the applications, blah, blah, blah. And, why is that important? And, like how that improves the patient workflow. So that should be your introduction with what audience is going to look into this paper. And this is narrative review, just to make sure that we understand that part. So we were looking into all the papers, and then we wanted to tell why is that important and what has been done in those areas. So our focus was all this AI is good, but what are the applications? That's what we really want to bring out there. So we talked about overview of the workflow and what are the different types of radiomic features. And then you go, this is the crux. So we wanted to divide into basically three parts, like diagnostic application, prognostic applications, and applications in selecting optimal therapy, because those are three important things that matters. Whatever the literature you put out there, you need to define what are the baskets you want to put all that research in. Either you're trying to improve diagnostic accuracy, or you're trying to build models that can tell you prognosis of in patients with glioblastoma, because that's a very aggressive tumor. And more and more research is coming in molecular pathology. You want to tell which markers are important for guiding personalized therapy, because that's the million-dollar question out there. So that's how we formulated our research. And then in each one, we started putting into different, even in the diagnostic, what diagnostic applications could be. And if you see all these different papers or landmark papers, we summarize them into with their results into each subsection. Like if you're trying to differentiate in tumors or molecular subtypes, and then or treatment effects. So that's how we approached. And of course, we gave example, and these are the prognostic models, and these are optimal therapy. And one thing you need to realize, if you see already here we are at 94, citation, and you're going to be citing so many papers out there because that's the purpose, So you want to always, it's a good thing, summarize everything into tables, because no, even I can't read this, all this paper and kind of suddenly know that, I understood what everyone is saying. So one important thing is, structure your tables and put everything that you have said in a very easy, comprehensible manner that anyone can read. So this is how we did. Okay, what are the authors in each paper? So each column here is, each row is a separate paper by the author. How many patients were there? How many were test training data sets were there? What were they trying to do? For us, it's important what magnet they were using, like a segmentation software, radiomic analysis, discriminating feature, whatever the statistical approach that they used, and the results. So that's very important. Whether it's a systematic or innovative review, the only difference, like I said earlier, is the bias component gets reduced in systematic review. But this is how you want to give the information to your reader. So it makes sense. If anyone want to specifically look for any specific application, they can just go there, and all papers have information in a very standardized way. That's how we wanted to tell it to our readers. And then in discussion, of course, you summarize, and then you start putting things together, and then, your limitations, of course, every study has limitation. You never want to say that we didn't have any limitations. So describe the limitations, and then tell the future direction. This is, I think, is the most important part, because now till now you have been critically analyzing the literature. You're formulating kind of or supporting, or your hypothesis, and now you want to tell, okay, agree. So we all agreed this hypothesis, and all this literature tells us that this is the direction. But what's the future holds? That's the most important thing you want to tell. I did look into all the literature till now, and these are the limitations. I think we need to move in this direction, so your paper becomes a landmark for others to follow. And that's really is the purpose of your research. Otherwise, you're just summarizing other people's research. It needs to be critical. It needs to be, a very well conceptualized, summarized, and portrayed, and then give your future directions. And then, of course, conclusion, like we discussed. References are important, and we're going to talk briefly. I know you guys had other sessions earlier where they talked about, what the best tools, but just I want to give you the view. So for example, this paper had 143 references. You want to make sure that they are well cited, again, without biases. All the landmark papers needs to be in there. And the journals you have done, this paper took almost 2.5 years of my time, and you don't want in the end that your paper is getting delayed, or worse, getting rejected just because stupid thing as, formatting the references. And you don't want to spend another 6 months just formatting. So simple things make like easier, use a proper software, and we'll talk about a little bit about that. And then, so when if you are resubmitting to some other journal, and like you can just quickly modify that and then manually changing. Think about if you had to manually change 142 citations in a like paper based on reviewers' comments or whatsoever. This was one of the other paper that we we published in JAMA Neurology. This was more kind of systematic review. We had a proper like keywords in there, the database that we use, and how much articles came out. So it's reproducible. Inclusion criteria that we had, exclusion criteria we had. We even had papers from China. Those were only in Chinese language, because this is, if you think about, the inhaled heroin, chasing the dragon, that's the name came from, using one form of, using like heroin consumption. And most of the literature, actually, in subsophatic cases, they were from China. And we had a literature. We didn't want to exclude. We could have just excluded that Chinese paper were excluded, but we hired a Chinese translator to translate all those papers into English, because we thought that's important, because that's where it came from initially. And we included that and we described that. So one of the reasons it was accepted in JAMA. So, so that's where you need to remove the biases, explain why you're excluding, why you're showing inclusion criteria, and make sure it's reproducible. That's more kind of systematic review. This is one of the paper, we submitted, this one to Journal of Neurosurgery. It was a review paper submitted, but they loved it, and they and the special issue that they had, the editor reached out to us that, hey, we would appreciate if you can convert your review paper into editorial. Now, these are different type of research. I think other people have spoken about that. The point is, if you've done a good job, and even if your paper gets rejected, for example, for some reason, there are ways, that you can reformulate and, give different angle and still make it published so other people can benefit from that. So coming to the last slide, the references, like I said, bibliography is very important. I want to stress again and again, when I started writing my first paper, I was lost. I was like it was a case report with some literature review or something, and we had like 25 citations or something. But every time we were submitting, they were making changes, and it moves. And of course, I was named, I was quickly checking and sending, and they were like, okay, these are referenced wrong, and that's embarrassing, So then coming back to like, hey, so you're referencing to to Dr. Manjula, and this paper was written by Dr. Singh. That doesn't go that well, and so think about, like, if it's a big impactful paper, you don't want to spend your energy on that part. So I used EndNote. This was the most popular back then. It's a paid one, so you don't have to use that. Now PaperPile is like a Google sheet. If you're using, it's very efficient. You can just type and cite while you write, kind of thing. Zotero, one of my friends recommended. I haven't used. I heard it's very good. I have my whole libraries in EndNote, and I'm so used to it, so I just use that and it works. But these two could be. This is free. I don't know about this. I heard it's very user friendly. So both could be something that you guys need to look for. But I would recommend, even if you're writing a case report, don't do it manually. Even if you're 10 citations or 5 citations, just use one of these, and so you get used to it, and you will see how much easier your life becomes as you progress in your research career just from the reference file. I still know when I was applying for residency, I had 1 or 2 papers just because residents told me, hey, and if you can just handle the references and submit the paper, we'll get you on board. And I was like, okay, that's low-hanging fruit. I can do that. And of course, I had that time figured out EndNote part. So I would do, and magically I would submit, and it would get accepted. So that your role, even when you're approaching, you can say, I have experience using these softwares, and I have experience submitting, my manuscripts to the journals. And if you reach out to someone for research, even that would be extremely helpful. If someone reached out to me with that skill set, I would say, okay, yes, I have like 4 or 5 papers. If you can do that, take it, and then we'll get you involved in the paper, do the proofreading and do those parts, and you could be part of the paper. So that would be a low-hanging fruit that you guys can approach as a student, as or when you're applying for research, or even when you're like early in your residency, because you don't have time, that could be your contribution. So, and of course, slowly and steadily you can move further. So yeah, that's pretty much it. And feel free to ask any questions that you may have, and I would love to address them.
Thank you so much, Dr. Singh. Thanks for such a great presentation, first of all. We do have some questions from the audience. First of all, my question from you is, I saw that you have almost 500 citations, and then you have published like not gigantously in during your residency and before residency and during fellowship. So how do you like do it all? How do you maintain that work-life balance? And how, like, do you have any tips for the students to do the same?
Yeah, see, like one thing I want to tell that, like if you see all those papers, they were like 10 people or 12 people, depending on, again, what kind of paper that is. But the point is, for review article, for example, or any paper, you don't have to do everything by yourself. It's about finding the right team. And initially you could be just part of already existing team and tag along, and you could be second author or third author, and as you show your credibility, you can propose, hey, I have this idea, and I want to execute this. What's your input? And I can tell you from my experience, if some student comes to me and I feel like that's a good idea and could be a good addition to the literature, I would say, go on, man. I will bring other people who are experts in the field, and we can work it out together. So research is all about finding the right mentors and collaborators. It's not about people say, oh yeah, I saw the article, there was only one author, great, probably when I'm the chairman I can do that. Probably even that time I won't do that. It's a different approach. But most of the people, if you see, they are multi-institutional. Unless you are writing editorial or a commentary, or you are the only person in that field, and you want to make a review article in that area. But if you see most of the impactful papers or in the big journals, they are multi-institutional. There are multiple collaborators or multiple people from different divisions within the same institution. But again, when you're early in your career, I think adding any skill, again, I would stress about this again. Even if you can manage all the references and do the submission part, that could be good enough to get your foot in the door. So you don't have to kill yourself. The more important thing at your stage is to get involved in multiple projects rather than doing one project that would take 2 years. I can afford that to do now. I don't have to prove credibility. But when I'm early in the game, I want more papers, because it doesn't matter what author I am until I'm doing PhD. As I am more part of the more papers or more teams, when someone is reviewing my application, they will see that this person can work with different teams, and he or she has some skill set that people want to have him or her in their project. So I think at your stage, that's more important. Reach out to more people, have one or two good skill sets, be humble, and tell them that you have done this in the past. If you have papers already published, great. You can send, hey, these are the few published papers, and I want to get involved. I think that's more important, and you don't have to kill yourself for that. It's just your communication skills and how you approach is more important.
Thank you so much, Dr. Gagan. That kind of answered my question very well. And also at this stage in our careers, I think that's more important for us to like look for mentors specifically in our domain, and then take on from there. A question about reviews specifically: is it harder to get narrative reviews published because they carry a degree of bias compared to systematic reviews?
No, it probably would be other. I mean, okay, so maybe equal difficulty. I would say, or the point I wanted to make is more from the interpretation standpoint. When you are reading a paper, like when you're opening a paper, no one is going to write it's a narrative review or it's a systematic review, or unless it's written in the, I guess, in the title, a meta-analysis. So it's a meta-analysis. But more important, I think the point I wanted to make is that like for you to understand when you're going to the conclusion, if they have not described methodology in a way that you can reproduce, like then it's more likely going to be narrative review, which means that just when you're making your clinical decision, maybe in radiology, for example, like some drug came and someone had review about that, so you looking into that its application, or you using that into your patient population, you want to make sure that it was like the conclusion that they're making is like without any biases. So it's more important from that point. So to answer your question, if if it's early, for example, like you're making that narrative view and you have credibility in the field, journal will take it. If not, they won't take it, because they don't know, they don't know you, and if it's not properly mentioned or structured in the methodology, they they won't trust. Like it's harder from that perspective until as you are established in the field. They know that you're gonna do your full thorough research, and the conclusion that you're going to be making is going to be helpful to the reader. And most of the time, I have, from my experience, I don't know, like different people might have different experiences. Narrative reviews are generally going to be invited ones. Like so, unsolicited narrative reviews are very difficult to publish. Like so on most of these journals, they invite you, or there are special topics. For example, in those narrative reviews, they go well. Like because now they have reached out to you, so you have probably been in the field. But yeah, so I think one important decision for you to understand, so you know what you are making your decision based upon. The second, depending on which journal you're submitting, and if you're unsolicited, if you're sending more systematic review or meta-analysis, probably high likely chances of getting accepted, versus if you're invited article and then if you tell them you're going to be doing this narrative review, and if they're okay with that, then you can go. So the one that we did was we were invited, based on our previous research, so we did that.
Great, thank you so much. That kind of answered my question. Another question from one of our viewers is how to commence literature search. Like when we search with PubMed keywords, hundreds and thousands of papers come up. So how do we actually select which papers to cite? And also the second follow-up question for the same one is how to decide on inclusion and exclusion criteria to select those articles.
So that's where it's also going to be very broad, and probably it's going to vary how it relies, or it fits in your in what you are looking for. That's where when I say spend most of the time there, means if you have figured that part out and you're confident with going ahead, after that is the easy part, because that's where I spend most of my time. For example, if I'm doing I can give the example where I know about the literature. Say I want to do glioblastoma papers, and I want to look into a certain kind of AI deep learning models and how they have been performing, or in the field out there. I'll start looking. So I start with, again, you can start with simple, because most important, like I said, you can have a foggy hypothesis, then start with the simple keywords, or just writing into the PubMed and see what are the top. That's my approach. Top 10, 15 article comes, then quickly read them and see which one has basically closest, or has the material that is probably is close to what you are trying to achieve. Once you figure that out, that's how I start. I'll pick one or two papers that I think are most relevant to my hypothesis, and then I start reading. And I try to make sure that they're more recent ones, because that's where they're gonna be most up to date. Again, with the deep learning research, AI research, that's how it works. And then what I do is I start going into there and I read the paper, and then I see their citations. I go from their citation, read those papers. That's how I build my own, a kind of understanding of the, of that topic or the area. And then I start writing my keywords, the things that are like, for me, radiogenomics, like GBM, deep learning, for example, AI. So there's certain keywords that I want to look into. I start formulating that and then start putting into, like in the Medline, if you go, there are different ways you can put in there. If you're doing systematic review, it makes sense or matters. If you're doing narrative review, then you can just keep building over there. It's like like a tree chain. Once you start cleaning your aims of your like paper, then in each section you start reading the top two paper and go into their citation, because those two papers are in the top because they have cited papers correctly. That simple thing. That's your hypothesis as well. Like if someone has 500 citations, you can be certain that this paper has been probably like a well read and published. Look at what they have cited and look into those papers. And because there are going to be some landmark papers which they have cited, you can't miss. Like if someone wrote the first paper about the applications of AI in defining MGMT methylation, for example, in GPM, you have to include cite that paper into your review if your topic is related to molecular markers. So that way, I think I will formulate. If you are doing systematic review, then I would do the keywords, include that, and the inclusion exclusion criteria that you have to define based on for example, if I want to do the papers, see, in GBMs, it's complicated. The 2021 WHO classification changed how we define GBMs. It's a good example. If I'm now looking into the literature before 2021, GBMs had wild type and mutant type categories. After 2021, there's no more mutant type GBMs. Now, if I'm doing the review, probably I want to exclude those papers, where their interpretation was heavily on the mutant types, or at least I want to make sure that is part of that. And now the pediatric gliomas are totally separate, so you want to put the age criteria probably into their, like if you're doing gliomas, I only want to do the adult gliomas, like in certain age, So there are different ways you will start then formulating your inclusion and exclusion criteria. Again, it's going to be very specific based on what you are trying to achieve. It could be any drug that came out, or any in psychiatry, if any methodology that has been proven more effective in treating certain disorder, you want to then make sure that which population that it serves, which population it won't, then you can start playing into exclusion criteria. So that's where reading the first initial papers, you can be very descriptive when you're searching initially and see what the top paper comes. Once you decide these two papers are going to be most closest to your whatever hypothesis you're trying to prove, from there you will find other answers. So that's probably where, once you move from foggy hypothesis to more clear hypothesis, that's where you will get all those answers. But the structure or template is there, so you don't miss those things, and they're important. So that's where you're going to start looking what they have done on those papers, what were their criteria, and then you will start seeing that this would be my criteria of including or excluding those based on my hypothesis.
Thank you, Dr. Singh. That sounds good. And you have kind of given us, the students, a guideline to, how to kind of synthesize your research question as well, and how to kind of begin even like the review process to start the write-up. I do have another question from one of the writers. So that was actually one of the questions when I started my research. So for example, to write down a review paper, if you have used another review paper as a resource, do you cite the papers that are inside that review paper, or do you cite the source review paper? So that used to be my question as well. Would you like to shed some light on that?
Yeah, so see, that's always becomes tricky. If I'm using the review paper where I'm getting the primary papers, I would do that as a courtesy to cite that paper. And that's the reason why these review articles are so much cited. Like the one we published already has 60 citations, and it's a year old or something. Probably because people who are writing in that area, they are going to our paper to get all the other references that we made in our paper, and then as a courtesy, they cite your paper. So yes, that's how we do. At least and you're not going to use 10 review papers to formulate your review. You're going to be probably using one or two, the ones that are well cited and you think are closest to yours. Like I used two in my paper, and you cite them, and then use that as a kind of mirror to look into other paper that they have cited, so you don't have to look for all those papers individually. That helps. So yeah. And this question also comes in the editorial. People have asked, should the editorials be cited or not? And I have seen our editorials being cited. most of the time I don't cite editorials unless that's really was the kind of because editorials are either like in JAMA or other papers, journal NEJM, they are very impactful, or they are something new that a field is trying to explore, and they're giving their perspective. So if you feel like that really helps you kind of clarify your hypothesis, I would cite them, but review articles I generally cite definitely more, because I feel like they are very helpful, like when I'm writing my papers.
Thank you, Dr. Singh. That was like really like an interesting question, and I think most of us have that question initially. Another thing is, there's one viewer. They say that I keep getting invitations from journals to be an editor or to submit articles. How do we actually recognize predatory emails and predatory journals?
It's a very interesting question. Like I was talking to one of my attending, like 2 weeks ago, and he asked me that, hey, I got this invitation, and I think we should submit. And I looked at that, I like, that doesn't look that good. So let's look into that. And he has a friend, like he's I think a chairman at one of the big institutions. He sent it to her, and then she said like, this is a predatory journal, don't waste time. So yes, sometimes it's very easy, like it's like getting a scam email, like that's a scam. Sometimes it's hard, and at your stage, of course you want to get papers out, so you don't care that much about the impact factor, or or which region they're serving. Like when you are at like later stage, or at the stage that I'm still very early, but for me it's now very important which journal I publish, or the impact factor, because that's how I'm going to be judged as as I move from like into my early research career. If my initial papers are not into good journals, that's kind of killing my own career. So sometimes it's easy, sometimes it's tough. I would say use your best judgment. Use Google, put the journal in there. If the journal is not even PubMed index, I won't even bother, because then there's no one is gonna go into all other like indices, at least in earlier stage. But there's some journals, Radiology came up with the Radiology AI journal. Initially, you need at least 3 years before you can be part of the PubMed indexing. So if they are gonna be indexed, and they are just because they're new journal from a big society, you can still go with them, because in 3 years they're gonna meet the criteria. But other one, I will be careful. And then the last part is ask your mentors, because if you ask someone, that's why you need mentors. Hey, Dr. Mansuri, I got this email, looks like they invited me, does it look legit? And he will know. Or if he doesn't know, he will ask his friend, that will know. So that's how I think it should be done. And it's very easy to you don't want to waste time on the wrong journal. And most of those journals are going to be basically asking you to pay, which again is a different topic we can discuss at a different time. Some big journals, if you want your journal to be open access, they will charge you money, but that's for a different purpose, because they want more reader, reach out. So yeah, so Google, look around to see if it's been reported, and ask your mentor or someone who has more experience to avoid that pitfall.
Sounds great. Thank you so much for such an insightful answer. Another follow-up question about the journal specifically is, again, I mean, some journals are there that are PubMed indexed, like Curious, for example. Like I've seen students having multiple publications in Curious. How do you look as, in an application, if a student has 10 Curious publications while the other student has 10 publications in different journals? How would you rate the difference, and like what the value is for that specific journal?
See, that's again a very tricky question. But having more paper is good. Like if you had 10 papers, say, I don't know, like a American Psychiatric Society, like if they have journal, I don't know which journals, like we have American Journal of Neuroradiology. If I have 10 paper in AJNR, I mean, you're special, you made it. If you have in other like journals which are more broader, with like in QS, you can publish any specialty, like they are not subspecialty specific, over there, and also, like I have a different, things. I have one or two papers, like, and and then I stopped, sending over there my personal choice because I feel like it needs to be more neurology specific, like but where you are, I think having few papers over there won't hurt you, like having 10 paper won't, they're not gonna rank you okay in the top because you get 10 paper in QS. I don't think it makes much difference from two versus 10. Maybe you already checked out. I think so Aman was talking his last one of the talk I was listening to is like it's a checkbook. You did it. Then more important after that would be, like if it's in psychiatric specific journal, like or like or more, broad journal like Frontiers, for example. They have in neuroscience Frontiers, they have Frontiers in different like so those probably would then start carrying more weightages. Uh yeah, so be careful, like just I don't think Curious is a predatory journal, but it's not like very highly reputed as well. So more papers won't help you much over there. But if you are just writing the first two or three and you have review article, no one else is accepting, okay, don't send the first journal the paper as a first journal. If you are confident you're writing a good, send it to the best in your field. Most likely it's gonna get rejected. If it gets under review, most of the time it's not even gonna go under review. That's fine. If it gets under review, you're gonna get the feedback that's gonna shape your paper. Like for the next best journal. And that's how you would approach. Like because those, if it gets under full review, you will get comments from the reviewers. Those are generally very very helpful. So I won't send to the journal where I feel like most likely is gonna be accepted. I send generally to a journal where I feel like I'm gonna get the best reviewers comments, and then from there I take it and kind of a litmus test paper, like where do I stand, and then I send it to the next journal which I feel like. And if of course if it, for example, doesn't get accepted, you still want paper to be outside into the literature, and Curious is PubMed indexed. So yeah, so you can send it over there, sure.
Sounds great. Sounds great. And like while we are talking about journals, how important is submitting to a journal that has open access? Because I mean, some journals may charge a fee for the open access part. So how important is it as a student to kind of just focus on those?
So for as a student, I don't think it matters. Like the one where I paid fees was this Nature paper. Like and we paid close to like a 3 grand or something. Which again hospital paid. Like but hospital needs to know like why this is important, and we told them we think this could be a very highly cited paper. If it's open access, people will read and cite. That's where it makes sense. And of course they trusted us. We published and it's already like getting cited pretty well. So that was our approach. Like any one of you can go to that paper and read the full paper, versus some of other paper that I have, like where like you have to have institutional subscription, or you have to buy. The problem with those is now there are more ways coming out, like in the research gate you can give your paper out, whatever, but then like there are copyright issues or whatever, that you have to be careful. If you can afford it, pay for it. Like if you have a mentor who has a research going on, most of the research people that I have worked with from the lab, they paid for it. So like so they want that to be read, and they pay the fees all the time. The ones we wrote as a student resident, like kind of thing into like a journal neurosurgery, for example, or a few other journals, they were not paid, and we were not expecting that to be like cited crazy, like so. So we were okay as long as it's out there, and whoever can read. Yeah, so simple thing. If you try to find a mentor who's part of a big institution, because they generally have their CME money, and if they are willing to pay for that, like then why not? But then you have to sell it that why would they should pay $3,000 while they can use that for a Hawaii trip. So yeah, that's where your paper should be very strong. And if you feel like, then go for open access. Definitely give more viewership.
Thank you. Thank you. True. And I mean, when it comes to mentor, I mean, I had personal experience with like finding a mentor, difficulty in approaching the mentors. So how do you think we should, first of all, approach mentors with an idea, or even if we want to get involved into something, what should be our kind of a guideline on how to kind of approach the mentors in the same domain?
Yeah, I mean, it's simple, like when I was a student or a resident, I felt like, oh man, it's like very hard. They're very busy. Most of the time they are not. So, but you have to go with the right question because they have other preferences, they might be busy with their family, they might be busy with their work, and when you're reaching out, do some homework, just don't send an email, hey, I'm interested in research, can you help me? That's not going to apply. Do look into the profile, look into the Google Scholar. I always look into the PubMed, put their name. The problem is like if you put Gagandeep Singh, they're going to be papers that are not relevant. So most of the people from here, they have unique names and you can find paper easily and look at their affiliation. So you want to make sure if I'm sending to Ramos, is the right Ramos I'm sending, hey, your working stroke is amazing versus, like if I'm just checking and I never check the author affiliation and this guy is from Switzerland and he's working in, I don't know, like GI cancer and send this guy, hey, your work in GI cancer is amazing, it's a breakthrough. But so because those things also kind of tell them, hey man, you are not even careful looking into my profile and making sure that this is the right person. And when you're going to be writing a paper and doing the citations, how can I trust you? So do basic research, look at the profile. Most of the people have Google Scholar, look into their affiliation, make sure they're the right person, look what their major focus is, then make a small email. Hey, I read your paper. Your interest is in finding imaging surrogate markers in AI. I have done work in that space, or I have not done work in that space, but I'm interested in exploring that area. My previous work has been in this field, but I have experience writing papers, manuscript, doing literature review, but working with the references using EndNote and the submission process. If any of those skill set could be helpful in your research work, and I can be part of that group, I'll be more than happy to join. So with that, you're making a pitch that no one can refuse. Why would I refuse a person who knows what he or she is doing, and it's going to work with me, and I don't have to, pay for that, at least for now, and we can build something meaningful together, and and publish. So no one would say no to that. It's just how you approach is more important. Don't be afraid if someone is, oh man, this is from Harvard or from Yale, they need probably more people like you guys because they have more work that they can deliver. And if you can tell them that you could be asset rather than a liability, they will entertain your request.
Very well said. Thank you so much, Dr. Gagan. Thank you for such a great presentation and being really authentic in this kind of presentation. Given that it's 2 and respecting the time, so I would like my co-host to take lead. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Gagan.
No problem. Thank you for inviting me.
It was a wonderful presentation and everyone had some very positive comments. So thank you so much.
Anytime.